She counted. That was the thing nobody knew about Sage Briggs. Not the teachers who looked away, not the nurses who filed reports that disappeared into the wrong desk. Not the neighbors who saw a thin girl in too small clothes and told themselves it wasn't their business. Nobody knew that for 11 months counting had been the only thing standing between Sage and the darkness that lived at the back of her mind. She counted the knots in the plywood ceiling of the shed. 43. She counted the seconds between Diane's footsteps crossing the yard and the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. Usually 12. She counted the days since she had last seen her father's face, not in a photograph, but in her actual memory, the living version of him laughing whole. 271 days. And now, on a Friday evening in November, standing outside the Harrowfield Public Library, with snow just beginning to fall, and the temperature dropping towards something dangerous, Sage Briggs counted the steps from the front door to the corner table in the back. 47. She had counted them before she even decided to go inside. She had stood on the sidewalk for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. She counted those too, watching through the glass, watching who was inside, watching who might help her, watching who might be the last chance she had before the storm buried everything. The library closed in 9 minutes. She had 9 minutes to change the direction of her life, or she had nothing. She went inside. The warmth hit her first. The building was overheated the way old municipal buildings always were in winter, the radiators clanging and hissing, pushing the temperature to somewhere around 76 degrees. For most people, that was stuffy and uncomfortable. For a girl who had spent the last 3 nights sleeping on a camping mat in an uninsulated shed where the thermometer read 29 degrees, it felt like walking into another world entirely. Her burned hands, still wrapped in gauze that had not been changed in 4 days, throbbed with the sudden shift in temperature. She kept them hidden inside her sleeves. The library smelled like old books and burnt coffee and the particular kind of quiet that settles into public buildings at the end of the day when the people who work there have started thinking about going home. Fluorescent lights hummed above threadbare carpet, the color of dried mud. 3 rows of shelves divided the room. In the back corner, a table. In that table's corner, chair, a man. She had seen him before she came in. Hard to miss. Hard not to look at and equally hard to keep looking at. But she looked. Because looking carefully at things was also something Sage Briggs had learned to do in 11 months of survival. She looked at the 4 other people in the library first. The college student at the computer terminal, early 20s, headphones, backpack, occupying the chair beside him, with the territorial certainty of someone who had been using that chair as a barrier for the past 40 minutes. He had glanced at her when she walked in, looked at her hands, looked back at his screen. The elderly man with the Wall Street Journal late 70s wedding ring, reading glasses on a chain. He had been sitting in the same chair for at least 47 minutes based on the way his coat was still hanging on the back. He looked kind. Sage had learned that kind-looking did not mean much. Carol Finch at the circulation desk, 58 years old, sensible shoes, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of woman who had been working in this library for so long, she had become part of the architecture. She was doing end-of-day paperwork. She had looked up when Sage entered, offered the automatic professional smile, looked back down. And the 2 women from First Baptist near the new release shelf, both wearing purple choir rehearsal shirts with joyful noise embroidered on the pocket, both carrying canvas tote bags printed with scripture. Love one another, faith, hope, love. They were discussing tomorrow's Thanksgiving food drive as they gathered their things, their voices carrying the warm satisfaction of people who consider themselves good. Sage had approached them in order. She had gone to the college student first because he was young, and she had thought maybe young meant less afraid. He had set his backpack on the empty chair before she finished her sentence. His girlfriend was coming, he said. She had been watching him for 40 minutes. He was alone. She went to the elderly man next. His expression shifted through pity, discomfort, in the particular calculation of someone deciding whether helping would cost them something. He gathered his coat off the back of his chair. Had to leave soon, he said. He moved to a different table 20 feet away and sat back down. She went to Carol Finch, last resort before the corner table, before the man everyone in the room was pretending not to notice. Carol looked at her burns. Concern crossed her face. Genuine, Sage thought, real concern for almost 3 full seconds. Then something else took over. The machinery of protocol. The library closes in 10 minutes, honey. Do you have someone picking you up? I can call someone for you. Sage knew what calling someone meant. It meant calling Diane. Diane would thank Carol in her warm, professional voice. Diane would drive to the library and hold Sage's hand in the parking lot and say, "Sweetheart, you had me worried." And that night, the punishment would be worse than anything yet. "I'm fine, ma'am, thank you." She walked away before Carol could insist. The 2 church women, the last ones in the final minute before Sage ran out of options. Both of them had scripture on their bags. Love one another. One glanced at Sage and nudged her friend. The friend looked Sage up and down, the burned hands, the torn leggings, the duct-taped shoes, the thinness that had become so severe that Sage's collarbones were visible above the neckline of her cardigan. The woman's expression was not concern, it was judgment. "Honey, does your mama know you're here? You look a fright. Best get on home before you catch cold." Sage's throat tightened. These were women who carried Bibles with love, one another literally printed on their bags. Women who were planning a food drive for strangers. Women who were looking at an 11-year-old child with visible burn injuries, severely underweight, wearing duct-taped shoes in November. Their response was that she looked unkempt. "We'll pray for you, sweetheart, but a child your age should be home having supper." They left. White minivan. Sage watched the taillights disappear into the early dark. 4 attempts, 4 rejections, 8 minutes gone. 1 option left. She turned toward the corner table and she counted. 1, 2, 3. The cardigan she was wearing was purple, soft cotton, embroidered daisies along the collar. Her father had given it to her for her 10th birthday. She had been wearing it the night he died, or rather the night Diane said was an accident, the night the smoke detectors did not go off, the night the fire started in the basement, near a furnace that had been serviced 2 weeks before and certified as perfectly functional. The cardigan had 3 missing buttons, now replaced with safety pins. It was the last thing her father had given her, and she wore it every day she was not locked in the shed, because wearing it was the closest she could get to him. 11, 12, 13. Her right shoe was held together with duct-tape sole to upper no laces. Both shoes were 2 sizes too small. She had not grown into them. She had grown out of her old ones, and these were what Diane provided. When she walked, the tape made a soft scraping sound on the carpet. 20, 21, 22. The man in the corner had not looked up yet. He was reading a paperback, spine-cracked pages yellowed with age, and handling the kind of book that had been read so many times it fell open on its own. He was big, 6 feet and more broad through the shoulders, gray beard, pale eyes. A scar ran down the left side of his face from temple to jaw, not a surgical scar, not a clean line. Something that had been torn. A Hell's Angels cut over a thermal hoodie. The kind of man that mothers pulled their children away from on sidewalks. Sage did not pull away. She had been watching him for 6 minutes, long enough to observe what she needed to observe. He had not looked at his phone once. In an era when everyone stared at screens constantly, he had sat in that chair for the entire time she had been watching, and he had read his book. That meant he was present in the room in a way most people were not. He had not watched her when she approached the other people. Most adults, when a child is in distress nearby, oscillate between watching and pretending not to watch, a kind of anxious surveillance. He had read his book, not because he did not notice. Sage had learned to tell the difference between people who did not see her and people who chose not to see her. He was not choosing not to see her. He was simply reading. And when she had walked toward the churchwomen, when the woman had looked at her with that expression and said, "You look a fright," Sage had caught something in her peripheral vision. A stillness in the corner. Not a reaction, not a flinch, just a very subtle, very controlled stillness, the kind that comes from someone accustomed to witnessing things that require a careful response. He saw everything. He just did not perform seeing it. 34, 35, 36. Her hands hurt. The gauze needed changing. The infection had been seeping through for 2 days, staining the bandage yellow-brown. Her right hand was worse than her left. Some of the older scars, the ones from 8 months ago, the ones that were fully healed into thick raised tissue, had restricted the movement of her 2 middle fingers. Occupational therapy, a real doctor had told her once, could address that. She had not seen a real doctor since the school nurse filed a report in March that disappeared into Diane's desk. 42, 43, 44. She was close enough now that she could read the spine of his book. Louis L'Amour Hondo. She knew that name. Her father had had a shelf of westerns, same yellowed paperbacks, same cracked spines. He had read to her from them sometimes when she was small, doing voices for the characters, making her laugh. 45, 46, 47. She stopped. The man looked up. His eyes were pale blue and they were very still. When they looked at you, not the restless scanning of most people's eyes, but something steadier and more deliberate, like a level being checked. He looked at her face first, then at her hands, at the gauze visible now where her sleeves had shifted, then back at her face. The assessment took maybe 4 seconds. Whatever he found, his expression did not shift toward alarm or discomfort or the particular kind of pity that preceded walking away. He set his book down, slowly, deliberately, with both hands visible. Sage opened her mouth. She had a speech prepared. She had been working on it for 11 days, ever since the night she had crouched at the cracked window of the shed in the cold and listened and written down every word. The speech was careful and logical and presented the evidence in order. She had rehearsed it mentally during the 40 minutes she had spent watching the library from the sidewalk. She said 5 words instead. "Please don't send me back." Her voice came out quieter than she intended. The radiators nearly swallowed it. The man's pale eyes did not waver. He pushed the empty chair across from him back with his boot, a single gentle motion metal leg scraping softly on carpet, creating space-making invitation. Not a word spoken, just a door open. "Sit down," he said. Gravel voice, the kind that had probably once carried across loud rooms, softened now to something that did not demand. "You're safe here." It took Sage 4.7 seconds to lower herself into the chair. Her body had forgotten what it felt like to sit somewhere without calculating how quickly she could stand back up. He placed both hands flat on the table, palms down, fingers spread. She understood without being told that this was intentional. No sudden moves, no hidden intentions. His hands did not move from that position for the next several minutes. He did not ask questions. He did not demand an explanation. He let her breathe, let the shaking in her shoulders slow from earthquake to tremor, let her burned hands still hidden in her sleeves stop clenching quite so hard. Let her eyes stop darting to the door every few seconds and settle into something closer to stillness. Then he said quietly, "Nobody's making you leave before you're ready." Sage pulled her right sleeve up first, then the left. She extended both arms and placed them on the table, palms up, the gauze bandages exposed in the library light. The staining was worse than she had thought. The infection had spread overnight, the edges of the bandage darkening where it had not before. The man's jaw tightened. Just once, his voice stayed level. "How long?" She told him. 13 months. Since my daddy died. Then she reached into the pocket of the purple cardigan. She had to use both hands, had to work her stiff fingers carefully around the folded paper because she had been carrying it for 11 days and she had been terrified to lose it. Terrified that the one piece of proof she had would somehow disappear, the way every other report and complaint and whispered confession had disappeared. The paper was worn soft at the creases. The edges were fraying. She had opened and refolded it so many times in the past 11 days that the folds had become deep and permanent. She placed it on the table between them with both hands like an offering, like something made of glass and hope. He unfolded it carefully. It was a church bulletin. Pre-Thanksgiving service. Gratitude in all circumstances. Harrowfield First Baptist, November 3rd, 2024. The printed text of the service occupied the center, but the margins, every blank space, the backs of columns, the white border at the bottom and top were covered in handwriting. Small dents shaking in places where the pencil had slipped because her hands had been trembling. He read it all. 2 minutes and 17 seconds. She counted. The bulletin contained a date November 3rd, and in the margins beginning with the date November 8th at the top and continuing in careful sequence, it contained everything Diane Alcott had said on the phone in the backyard at 9:17 in the evening, while Sage pressed herself against the cracked window of the shed and wrote down every word. But the bulletin also contained something that preceded November 8th, something that explained why Sage had the bulletin ready, why she had had it in her pocket for 5 days before the phone call happened. On November 3rd, 4 days before Sage overheard anything, Diane had taken her to First Baptist for the pre-Thanksgiving service. Sage had sat in the pew in her purple cardigan and listened to the sermon about gratitude in all circumstances, and during the offering, while the choir sang and the ushers passed the plates, Diane had leaned to whisper something to the woman beside her, a brief exchange too quiet to hear fully. But Sage had seen the other woman, Linda, Diane's sister, pass something to Diane, a folded paper. Diane had slipped it into her Bible without opening it. On the way home, Diane had been in a particular mood. Not the performed warmth she wore for public consumption, but something quieter and more focused, the kind of mood that preceded punishment. She had been thinking about something. Sage had noticed. Sage noticed everything. So she had taken the church bulletin from the pew rack before they left. She had put it in her pocket with a stub of pencil she kept hidden in the lining of the cardigan. She had a feeling, the animal instinct of a child who had learned to read danger the way a sailor reads weather, that something was coming, that she needed to be ready to write something down. 4 days later, the window of the shed was left unlatched. Sage had tested it every day for 3 weeks. Every morning when Diane brought the breakfast tray, if Sage had behaved, there was a tray. If she had not, there was not. Sage would press her shoulder against the window frame while Diane's back was turned and check the latch. Locked, locked, locked. Every day. Until November 7th. The latch was loose. It had always been a cheap latch, the kind that wore down with rust and cold, and this particular November had been colder earlier than usual. Diane did not know. She checked the deadbolt on the exterior door every night. She did not check the window. Sage knew this would not last. 1 night, maybe 2. Then Diane would notice, or the latch would seize again in the cold, and the window would be locked for another indefinite stretch of weeks. So she waited. November 8th, 9:17 p.m. Diane paced in the backyard with her phone speaking to Linda, her voice carrying clearly through 3 inches of cold night air. And Sage pressed her back against the shed wall, held the bulletin against the rough wood and wrote, "I'm telling you, Linda, the settlement money won't last forever. I did not sign up to raise someone else's problem child on my own dime for the next 7 years." She wrote it all, every word, hand shaking so badly in some places that the pencil gouged the paper. She wrote about the insurance policy, the contestability period, the observation that accidents happen, especially with children as clumsy and careless as this one. She wrote about the pre-arrangement os at Morrison Funeral Home. She wrote about the double indemnity clause, $360,000 for accidental death instead of $180. And she wrote the part that she had been turning over in her mind for 11 days, the part that kept her awake at night more than the cold did, more than the hunger did, more than the infected burns did, just like David, really house fire, carbon monoxide. Poor man never had a chance. These old Tennessee houses, you know how dangerous they can be. Her father's name was Owen Briggs. But in the years before she knew him, before Sage was born, Owen had had a different life. And Diane, before she was Diane Alcott, had had a different husband. His name was David. The man in the corner read every word. When he finished, he set the bulletin down on the table between them. His jaw was tight. His pale eyes were completely steady. Sage waited. He looked at her directly, not at the burns, not at the bulletin, not at the duct-taped shoes at her face, at the person sitting across from him. Then he said, "How long have you been planning to show this to someone?" 11 days, Sage said. His expression shifted just slightly in a way she had not expected and could not immediately name. Not pity, not the complicated look that adults got when they were deciding whether to get involved. Something simpler. "Smart kid," he said. Sage Briggs had been called a lot of things in the past 11 months. Clumsy, difficult, troubled, attention-seeking, ungrateful, a problem child. Nobody had called her smart, not once, not in 11 months. She did not cry. She was past the point where small kindnesses could make her cry. But something shifted in her chest, some knot that had been pulled tighter and tighter for the better part of a year, and the loosening of it was almost physical. He was already reaching for his phone. He stood up from the table, moved 3 paces to his left, staying in her sight line, making sure she could see him, and dialed. The line rang twice. Victor. His voice had changed. Not the quiet, deliberate tone he had been using with her, but something different, flatter, more precise. A voice built for situations where precision was the difference between good outcomes and bad ones. "Victor, it's Ryder. I need everyone within 50 miles at Harrowfield Public Library, 412 Highland Ridge Road." Now, brief pause. "What's going on?" 11-year-old girl, 2nd and 3rd degree burns covering both hands. Malnourished, hypothermic. Guardian is the elementary school principal. She's been hurting this child for 11 months, and she has a $360,000 life insurance policy with the girl as the insured. "We have written evidence. The woman's planning to kill her Victor. Blizzard hits at midnight, temperatures dropping to 11 degrees. The kid was going to spend the night in an unheated shed." Pause. Shorter this time. Say no more. "We're coming." The line went dead. Ryder walked back to the table and sat down. "They're coming," he said. 38 minutes. Maybe less. Until then, you stay right here with me." He stood again, almost immediately walked to the circulation desk. Carol Finch looked up, and Sage watched the nervousness cross the older woman's face. Big man, leather vest, scar, approaching her desk after hours. "You got any hot chocolate back there?" he asked. "Or coffee?" 2 cups. "And whatever snacks you have, granola bars, crackers, anything." Carol blinked. "The coffee is free for patrons. I think we have some granola bars in the break room." "I'd appreciate it." He came back with 2 styrofoam cups and 3 granola bars. He set them in front of Sage without ceremony. "Eat slow," he said, sitting back down. "Your stomach's going to need time." She picked up a granola bar. Her burned fingers struggled with the wrapper. He reached across, opened it, set it back in front of her. Did not remark on it. Did not make her feel small for the struggle. She ate slowly. Every few bites she looked at him, the instinct so deeply trained by now that she could not stop it, the constant checking of an adult's expression for the signs that said the kindness was about to end, that something was about to be taken away. He did not take it away. Outside, the snow was falling harder. The library windows showed a darkness that was thickening, the flakes catching the streetlight, the trees along Highland Ridge Road already beginning to bend. The National Weather Service had issued a winter storm warning earlier that afternoon, 6 to 9 inches by morning, temperatures dropping to 11 degrees by 2 in the morning. The kind of storm that turned an unheated 8 by 10-foot shed from miserable to deadly. Sage looked at the cardigan, the purple cotton, the embroidered daisies, the safety pins where the buttons used to be. She thought about her father's hands when he had given it to her, how he had wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, even though they did not have a lot of money for extras. How he had said the color reminded him of the wisteria that grew on the fence behind his mother's house in Kentucky when he was growing up. She thought about the phone call she had transcribed. Just like David. House fire. Carbon monoxide. Ryder pulled off his Hell's Angels cut and draped it over her shoulders. The leather was warm from his body heat. It smelled like motor oil and cold air, and something she could not name for several seconds. Then she named it. Safety. Not the absence of danger. The active presence of something between her and the dark. The vest swallowed her entirely. It hung past her knees. The back patch facing outward, the smaller patches on the chest pointing up at her chin. She sat inside it and felt the warmth seeping through her cardigan and into her arms. He crouched down to her eye level. "Anybody wants to get to you now?" He said, "They go through me first. And sweetheart, I don't move easy." She believed him. She looked at the church bulletin on the table between them. 11 days she had carried it. 11 days of showing it to no one, protecting it, touching it every 30 seconds to make sure it was still there, because it was the only proof she had that she was not imagining the nightmare, that the thing Diane was planning was real. She thought about the morning after she had written it, how she had gotten up from the camping mat before the cold grayed into dawn and read back what she had written, and her hand had gone to her mouth, because she had known in the animal part of herself that Diane intended for her to die. But knowing and having it in writing, having Diane's own words on paper, the funeral home quote, the double indemnity, the reference to her father, that was different. That was real in a way the animal knowing was not. She had thought about who to tell, thought about it systematically the way she had trained herself to think about problems, because Diane had taken away almost everything, but she had not taken away Sage's ability to think. The school nurse, Deborah Hollis, had photographed the burns in March, had filed a report. The report had gone to the principal. Diane was the principal. Her teacher, Ms. Holm, had heard Sage whisper the truth 5 months ago, had reported it. 3 days later, Sage was in a different classroom, and Mrs. Holm was told not to engage with her. Boyd Calloway, her father's best friend, had come to the house twice after Owen died. Diane had met him at the door both times. Sage had seen him through the window. He had not pushed past, had not insisted. The pastor at First Baptist had seen her at the pre-Thanksgiving service in November. He had looked at her thin arms and the ill-fitting clothes and had said, "Good to see you, young lady," shaking her hand with both of his in the practiced warmth of a man accustomed to making people feel welcomed. And he had not asked a single question. She had 9 minutes left in the library when she made her final count of the room. 4 people. The student who was already angry that she had approached him. The old man who had moved tables to avoid her. The librarian bound by protocol. The churchwomen who had told her she looked a fright. And the man in the corner that everyone else was staying away from. She had understood something in those 9 minutes that most adults spend lifetimes failing to understand. The performance of goodness, the Bible verses on the bags, the choir rehearsal shirts, the wedding ring, and the kind face, the professional smile, and the sensible shoes, none of it was the thing. None of it was what she needed. What she needed was someone who would not look away. And whatever Ryder Holt was, he was that. She was on her second granola bar when she heard it. Distant at first like thunder that had gotten confused about the season, then closer. Then the windows of the library began to vibrate in their frames, and the coffee in her styrofoam cup sent out tiny ripples, and the sound resolved itself into something unmistakable. Engines, dozens of them, scores of them. Carol Finch walked to the window with her hand over her mouth. The college student yanked off his headphones. The sound grew until it was not sound anymore, but physical presence. The air itself organized into something purposeful and enormous. And then all at once it stopped, 75 engines cutting off in something close to unison, the sudden silence heavier than the noise had been weighted with intention. Sage stood up. Ryder stood beside her. Through the library windows visible in the parking lot and along the full length of Highland Ridge Road in both directions, motorcycles sat in 4 precise rows. Not scattered, not random, organized. Disciplined. The kind of formation that belonged to people who had spent years doing difficult things together and had learned that discipline was the difference between chaos and outcome. Ryder looked at her. "These are my brothers," he said. "You ready?" She thought about the 47 steps. She thought about the bulletin in her pocket worn soft with handling. She thought about her father's voice reading westerns to her, the warmth of that, the safety of it, and how she had spent 11 months trying to get back to something that felt like that, and finding nothing but locked doors and turned backs and people who said, "We'll pray for you," while they walked to their white minivans. She thought about the man who had called her smart. She nodded. They walked to the entrance together. She was wearing his vest. It was still warm. Outside in the cold, 75 men stood in the falling snow. A man stepped forward from the group, older, broad-shouldered, with a deliberate economy of movement that belonged to someone who had once worked a profession where precision mattered. Victor Crane, 61 years old, former Cumberland County detective. The kind of man who had once built a case that should have put a woman behind bars, watched it collapse under political pressure, and left the job he had spent his life doing because he could not pretend anymore that the system worked the way it was supposed to. Behind him, Hank Pruitt, 68 years old, former Navy combat medic, already holding an emergency thermal blanket. Dale Shepard, 53, former high school principal. Weston Farley, 34, former Army intelligence analyst. August Greer, 89 years old, Korean War veteran. The elder of the group, standing with a stillness that had the quality of something that had outlasted most things it had seen and intended to outlast several more. And behind them, 70 others. All of them waiting. All of them there because one call had come in, and the call had contained 3 words that required no deliberation. 11-year-old girl. Hank Pruitt moved first. He came forward slowly, crouched to Sage's eye level in the cold because 40 years of working with people in crisis had taught him that the first thing you did was get small, get level, get human. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm Hank. Can I take a look at those hands?" Sage held them out. He examined them carefully. Both hands, the gauze, the staining, the restricted movement of the 2 fingers on the right. His expression did not change. His voice got quieter when he spoke to Ryder. 4 hours before hypothermia becomes dangerous. These burns are infected. She needs a hospital tonight. Ryder nodded. He looked at Victor. Victor already had his phone out. "I'll call the county prosecutor directly," he said. "Skip the sheriff. She probably has relationships there. We document everything first, then we move." He looked at Weston. Weston's laptop was already open. "Pull everything. Property, employment, insurance, financial. Build the timeline." Weston's fingers moved. Ryder crouched down beside Sage. He had been doing that, finding her eye level without making a production of it. "We're taking you somewhere warm and safe," he said. "The clubhouse. Heat, food, a couch. Hank's going to stay with you. Some of the brothers are going to your stepmother's house and documenting the shed you've been sleeping in. Some are making calls. I'm going to stay right next to you until every piece of this is locked down too tight to ignore. That okay?" She looked at him, at the scar along his jaw, the pale, steady eyes, the gray beard. "What about Diane?" Her voice was so small the falling snow almost took it. "Let her look," he said. "She's not getting anywhere near you." Sage pulled the church bulletin from the pocket of her cardigan and held it against her chest for a moment. 11 days, every 30 seconds, every day, touching it to make sure it was still there. Then she put it back in her pocket. Around her, 75 men who had dropped everything on a Friday night and ridden through the beginning of a blizzard were already in motion. Not chaotic, not loud, just moving. Because a child had asked for help, and one man had answered, and the rest had come when he called, because that was what you did. Carol Finch was still standing at the window. She had watched Sage approach every person in the library that evening. She had been the third refusal, the one who had offered protocol instead of presence, who had asked about someone picking her up because asking was easier than acting. Now she watched the child stand in the parking lot surrounded by 75 bikers in the falling snow, wearing a leather vest that hung to her knees, and she felt something settle into her chest. that she understood without wanting to, would not leave easily. She went to the break room, made a cup of hot chocolate from the powder packets they kept for children's events, carried it to the door and opened it, and walked out into the cold. Sage turned when she heard the door. Carol held out the cup, did not speak, did not offer explanation or apology, or the managed version of either. Just held out the cup. Sage looked at her for a moment, then she took it. She did not smile. She did not say thank you. She simply received the cup and turned back toward the parking lot, and the warmth in her hands was real. And Carol stood in the doorway of the library and watched her go and said nothing because there was nothing adequate to say, and she knew it. The snow was falling harder now. The temperature was already below freezing, dropping toward the 11 degrees that the Weather Service had promised by 2 in the morning. Somewhere across Harrowfield at 412 Maplewood Drive, an 8-by-10-foot shed sat with its deadbolt locked and its camping mat on the concrete floor, and its single thin blanket with holes in it, and its thermometer reading 29 degrees. It was empty. For the first time in 11 months, it was empty. Sage walked across the library parking lot, surrounded by men in leather vests and falling snow, wearing a Hell's Angels cut that hung to her knees, eating the last of a granola bar with stiff burned fingers. And she did not count a single step. She did not need to. The clubhouse sat 11 miles outside Harrowfield on a 2-lane road that the county resurfaced every few years and forgot about in between. Single-story building, cinder block, and wood gravel lot, American flag on a pole out front that snapped in the rising wind. Inside, warm, a kitchen with a commercial coffee maker running continuously, a long table where the chapter held its meetings, couches against the walls worn soft from years of use, a wood stove in the corner that Hank fed steadily through the night, keeping the temperature at something that qualified as genuinely warm rather than merely not frozen. Sage sat on the center couch wrapped in 2 blankets, and Ryder's vest hands curled around a mug of broth that Hank had warmed on the stove, and watched the room organize itself around her. She was good at watching. 11 months of careful observation had made her very good at reading rooms, at identifying who held authority, who deferred, who was performing, and who was simply doing. What she saw in the clubhouse was a group of men who had done difficult things before and had learned the difference between urgency and panic. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody moved without purpose. The room had the particular quality of a place where people knew their roles and trusted the people next to them to know theirs. Weston Farley sat at the long table with 2 laptops open, fingers moving in short, precise bursts. He was 34, former Army intelligence, with the kind of focus that narrowed his whole face when he was working. Everything pointed inward toward the screen, toward the data. He did not look up for the first 20 minutes. Victor Crane paced slowly near the door, phone to his ear, speaking in the measured cadences of a man who had spent decades giving information to people who needed to act on it quickly. Dale Shepard was on his own phone in the kitchen doorway, reaching out to Marvell Briggs in Kentucky, Sage's grandmother Owen's mother, the person who would need to get here as fast as road conditions allowed. Hank sat beside Sage and monitored her temperature every 15 minutes with a small thermometer and a quietness that did not feel clinical. When her mug emptied, he refilled it without asking. When the shaking in her shoulders picked up, he adjusted the blankets without comment. August Greer sat in the armchair nearest the wood stove, not on a phone, not at a laptop, just present. 89 years old Korean War veteran, the kind of stillness in him that came from having outlasted a great many urgent things. He watched Sage with the patient attention of someone who understood that sometimes the most important thing a person could do was simply refuse to leave. Outside, 4 motorcycles were already gone, headed to 412 Maplewood Drive to document what was there before the snow covered it. Sage watched the room. She held her breath. She breathed. It was the first time in 11 months that she had been in a room full of people and not calculated her exit routes. She did not examine why. She just let it be. The 4 brothers reached 412 Maplewood Drive at 8:43 in the evening. The house was dark. Diane's car was in the driveway. She did not know yet. Would not know until morning. The lights on the main floor were off, which meant she had gone to bed, or at least gone upstairs. The shed sat in the rear of the property, set back from the house, separated from the neighbor's fence line by a strip of dead grass and a row of cedar shrubs that blocked the sight line from the street. They used flashlights. They documented everything. The shed was 8 feet by 10 feet. Concrete floor, no insulation between the walls, and the exterior siding bare wood studding exposed on the interior gaps between boards where winter air pushed through. A single window, the latch visibly worn. A camping mat, thin blue foam, the kind sold at discount stores for $12, set directly on the concrete. One blanket, gray army surplus full of holes. A plastic bucket in the corner. A shelf with a single canteen. The deadbolt on the exterior of the door was heavy-duty, the kind installed specifically to lock from the outside. Not the kind of hardware a person added to an outbuilding for security purposes. The kind of hardware a person added to a room when they needed to ensure its occupant could not leave. One brother photographed every surface, every detail, every inch of wall. Another located the thermometer mounted just inside the door, a simple analog model, the kind with a red alcohol column. He photographed it against the timestamp on his phone. 29 degrees Fahrenheit, 11:42 p.m. Hank Pruitt. When the photographs reached him at the clubhouse, looked at them in silence for a long moment. Then he looked at Sage, who was asleep on the couch with the blankets pulled to her chin, her breathing shallow but steady. He did the math quietly for Ryder, for Victor. Core temperature in an uninsulated space at 29 degrees Fahrenheit for a 68-pound child already compromised by malnutrition and infection. Wearing the clothing she had arrived in hypothermia would reach the dangerous threshold in approximately 4 hours. By 2 in the morning, when the temperature outside was forecast to drop to 11 degrees and the shed interior would be following it down, the dangerous threshold would become the fatal one. By 6 in the morning, by the time Diane would have unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, the outcome would have been irreversible. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Victor said very quietly, to no one in particular, "We got here in time." And that was all that was said about it, because saying more would have required acknowledging how close it had been, and there was still too much work to do for anyone to stop and feel the full weight of that. Weston found the first piece at 9:11 in the evening. He pulled up the public property records for Harrowfield County. Owen Briggs, 318 Sycamore Lane. Died December 14, 2023. Property transferred to Diane Alcott through the estate. Listed for sale March 2024. Sold April 9, 2024 for $287,000. Diane had purchased a different house, 412 Maplewood Drive, in February 2024, 2 months before she sold Owen's house. Purchase price $168,000. The arithmetic was straightforward. She had walked away from Owen's death with $119,000 in equity that should, by any fair reading of the situation, have been held in trust for his daughter. Sage was Owen's only heir. Weston pulled the next layer. Life insurance records cross-referenced with public probate filings. Owen Briggs had carried a $163,000 life insurance policy. Standard term policy purchased 8 years before his death. The beneficiary had been updated 14 months before he died, changed from Sage Briggs, his daughter, to Diane Alcott, his wife. Paid out February 2024. Beneficiary, Diane Alcott, $163,000. The policy on Sage herself took Weston another 12 minutes to locate. It was filed through a different provider, and the name on the account was listed under the trust instrument that Diane had established as Sage's legal guardian. But it was there. Policy number, issuance date, coverage, amount, beneficiary. Signed at April 12, 2024. Effective date, April 20th, 2024. $180,000 standard death benefit. $360,000 for accidental death. Beneficiary, Diane Louise Alcott. Weston set down his coffee. He looked at the screen for a moment. Then he said without inflection, the way people say things when the thing they are saying is too large for inflection. She took out a policy on a 12-year-old child worth $360,000 and then started burning her hands on a stove. Victor, standing behind him, read the screen. Then Victor said, "Pull everything on Diane Alcott, not just here, everywhere. Every county she's lived in, every name she's used, marriage records, death records, insurance claims. Go back as far as the records go." Weston went back as far as the records went. It took him 40 minutes. Sage woke briefly at 10:30. She looked around the room, the wood stove, the men Hank in the chair beside her, and her hand went immediately to the pocket of her cardigan, confirming the bulletin was there. It was there. She lay back down. Hank adjusted the blanket. Within 3 minutes, she was asleep again. Ryder watched from across the room. He did not look at his phone. He did not pour more coffee. He just watched the sleeping child and said nothing. August Greer, from his armchair by the stove, looked at Ryder across the room. Her father, Ryder, said quietly, not a question, "Owen Briggs, the house fire, carbon monoxide." She wrote in the bulletin that Diane said, just like David, "Another husband." Greer nodded slowly. Ryder looked at the fire through the wood stove's glass panel. "She did not just plan to kill Sage," he said. "She killed Owen too. Sage has known that for 11 days and she has been carrying it alone." Greer said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. Some things did not need commentary. They just needed to be witnessed. Weston looked up from his laptops. "Ryder, Victor, you need to come see this." The records Weston had assembled covered 26 years. He laid them out in chronological order, pulling up each document on the screen and walking through it without editorializing. He had been trained to present intelligence without interpretation, to let the pattern speak for itself, because patterns that were pointed at rather than named had a way of being undeniable. First document, marriage record, 1998. Diane Louise Winters, her maiden name, married Richard Stanton, age 41, Knoxville, Tennessee. Richard Stanton died 2002, cause of death, accidental drowning. Lake boating accident. Norris Lake, July 14th, 2002. Richard fell overboard, struck his head on the hull, drowned before rescue arrived. Diane was on shore when it happened. Multiple witnesses confirmed her location. Life insurance payout, $85,000. Beneficiary, Diane Louise Stanton. Second document, marriage record 2005. Diane Louise Stanton married Gregory Alcott, age 44, Cumberland County, Tennessee. Gregory Alcott died 2009. Cause of death, accidental prescription drug overdose. Oxycodone prescribed for a back injury sustained at work. Toxicology showed levels 3 times the prescribed dose in his bloodstream. Diane had reported finding him unresponsive in their bedroom. She had explained to investigators that Gregory sometimes got confused about his dosing schedule, took extra pills when the pain was bad. Life insurance payout, $120,000. Beneficiary, Diane Louise Alcott, who had by this point changed her surname and kept it. Victor's expression when he saw the second document went through something that was not quite readable from the outside. His jaw set, his breathing changed just slightly. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Third document, marriage record 2022. Diane Louise Alcott married Owen James Briggs, Harrowfield, Tennessee. Owen Briggs died December 14, 2023. Cause of death, accidental carbon monoxide poisoning with associated thermal injuries. House fire originating in the basement near the furnace. Death certificate listed as accidental. Victor stared at the third document and said nothing. Ryder looked at him. Victor said very quietly, without looking away from the screen, "I investigated the Gregory Alcott case. In 2009, I was assigned to it because the responding officers had flagged some inconsistencies in the scene. I spent 4 months building what I thought was a solid case. The toxicology, the pill organizer, Gregory, kept a pill organizer organized by day and time because his own father had died from a medication error, and he was meticulous about it. The pills in the organizer did not match the levels in his bloodstream. Someone had given him additional doses. I had a theory about how. I was building toward charges. He stopped. The room was quiet except for the wood stove. The case was closed, he said, before I could get to charges. Political pressure, Diane had relationships in the department, people who thought she was a good woman, a school administrator, a churchgoer, someone with community standing. The captain came to me directly, said the evidence was not sufficient, said the case was closed. He looked at the screen. I left the department 6 months later. I told myself it was for other reasons. It was not. He was quiet for a moment. 15 years, he said. She has been out here for 15 years since then. Owen Briggs is dead, and a child has been sleeping in a shed at 29 degrees. Nobody filled the silence that followed. Then Ryder said simply, "We are not closing anything this time." Victor straightened. The thing that had been on his face settled into something harder and cleaner. "No," he said, "we are not." He picked up his phone and called prosecutor Dan Whitfield directly, because Victor Crane knew every layer of Cumberland County's legal infrastructure, and he knew exactly which layers Diane Alcott had relationships in and which ones she did not, and Dan Whitfield was one she did not. While Victor was on the phone, Weston kept pulling records. He was 34 minutes into the deeper background search when he found the fourth document, the one that took the story back further than any of them had anticipated. Gregory Alcott had a daughter from a previous marriage. Her name was Nora Stanton. She had been 7 years old when her father died in 2009. Custody had transferred immediately to her biological mother, who had been living in Illinois at the time. Weston found the insurance records 40 seconds later. Diane had taken out a life insurance policy on Nora Stanton while she was Nora's stepmother. $25,000. The policy had been opened in March 2008, 14 months before Gregory died. Nora's biological mother had canceled it the day custody transferred. Weston looked at the date the policy was opened, March 2008, 14 months before Gregory's death. The same structural pattern established guardianship, established insurable interest, wait for contestability, period, create conditions. Nora Stanton had been 7 years old. Weston pulled up a current address. Nora Stanton, now Nora Garrett, 32 years old, married, 2 children, living in Chicago. He dialed the number. She answered on the third ring. When Weston explained who he was and why he was calling, there was a long pause. Then she said, "Is she finally in custody?" "Not yet," Weston said. "Tomorrow, but we needed to know about your experience with her." Her voice shifted into something that had been waiting a long time to be said. "She married my dad when I was 6. He died when I was 7. The official story was an accidental overdose. But my dad was not a man who got confused about his medication. He was the most careful person I have ever known. He had a system. He had alarms on his phone. He was obsessive about it because his own father had died from a medication error, and he had sworn he would never let that happen to him." Weston asked, "Do you remember anything about a life insurance policy?" "My mom found the paperwork when she was packing up the house after my dad died. $25,000 on a 7-year-old. She thought it was strange, but the lawyer said it was technically legal for a step-parent to insure a stepchild with the guardian consent. Diane said it was just in case something happened while I was in her care. Your mother canceled it when custody transferred the same day, and she made sure Diane never had unsupervised access to me again. She told me years later that she had a feeling that something about Diane felt wrong, but she could not prove it, so she just kept me away." Weston said, "Nora, would you be willing to make a formal statement?" The answer was immediate. "Absolutely. If that woman killed my father, I want her in prison. And whoever the child is, she's been hurting now. Tell me she's safe." "She's safe," Weston said. Nora's voice hardened in the way that grief hardens when it finally finds a direction to move. "Make sure Diane never gets near another child, ever." Weston ended the call and looked at the room. 4 potential victims across 26 years. 3 dead. One 7-year-old who had survived because her mother trusted an instinct and acted on it without hesitation. And one 11-year-old who had walked 47 steps across a library because she had nothing left to lose. The pattern was complete. Victor came off the phone with Dan Whitfield. Prosecutor had been briefed. Emergency protective order would be issued tonight. Investigation was being escalated to the federal level immediately. Then Victor looked at the records Weston had assembled, and he was very still for a moment. "Get me everything you have on Owen Briggs's death," he said. "The fire, the furnace inspection records, the smoke detector reports, the original investigation file." Weston was already searching. It took him 18 minutes to find what Victor had suspected was there. Owen Briggs's furnace had been professionally serviced and certified as fully operational 14 days before the fire. The service record was documented. 3 smoke detectors had been installed in the house 7 months prior, brand new units with batteries rated for 10 years. All 3 had failed to activate during the fire. All 3 were found post-incident with dead batteries. And the investigating officer's notes from the original scene response contained a single flagged item. Accelerant detection dog had alerted to 2 separate locations in the basement. First location had been attributed to normal household chemicals. Second location had been noted as possible cross-contamination from the first and had been listed as a low-priority follow-up. The follow-up had never occurred because Diane Alcott had been in Nashville the night Owen Briggs died. Hotel reservation conference registration, multiple witnesses who had attended the same school administrator conference and had seen her there. Her alibi was documented, and it had been reviewed, and it had been accepted without challenge because everything else about the scene was consistent with the accidental narrative, and there was no reason to dig harder. Victor read every word of the file. Then he said, "Pull the hotel camera footage." Not the check-in records, the actual footage. Lobby cameras, parking structure, cameras, elevator cameras. "I want to see her arrive." Weston made the call to the hotel security department. It took 22 minutes of escalating phone calls to reach someone with the authority to pull archived footage from 9 months ago. When the footage came through, Weston opened it on the laptop and let it run. The woman who checked into the hotel on the evening of December 13, 2023 was the right age. She had Diane's honey blonde hair. She was wearing a coat that Diane owned. Weston had found a photograph on Diane's school administrator profile page that showed the same coat, but the face was not Diane's face. Close. Similar enough that a front desk clerk who had processed 50 check-ins that evening might not have looked twice, but not Diane. Weston pulled up the photograph of Linda Alcott from a social media profile he had found 20 minutes earlier. Diane's younger sister. Similar build, similar coloring, close enough in the face that a casual observer might not distinguish them. He placed the 2 images side by side. Victor looked at them for a moment. Linda Alcott checked into the Nashville hotel on the night Owen Briggs died, Weston said, using Diane's reservation, using Diane's name, creating the record that said Diane was in Nashville. While Diane was in Harrowfield, Victor said, while Diane was in Harrowfield, the room absorbed this. Ryder looked at the sleeping child on the couch, the purple cardigan, the safety pins where the buttons used to be, the hand resting against the pocket, even in sleep, even now, maintaining contact with the paper inside. She had known. At 10 years old, in the weeks after her father died, she had known in the way that children know things before they have the language for knowing them. She had spent 11 months surviving the woman who had killed her father and had carried that knowledge the whole time along with everything else. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Agent Dana Marsh arrived at the clubhouse at 2:14 in the morning. She was not what most people expected when they expected FBI. Late 30s practical clothes, dark circles under her eyes that spoke of a workload that coffee had stopped adequately addressing sometime around the 3rd year of her current caseload. She drove a sedan that needed an oil change. She walked into a room full of Hell's Angels without apparent hesitation and found the men she needed to talk to and got directly to it. She had been working financial fraud cases in the Eastern District of Tennessee for 6 years. 8 months ago, a routine audit of a guardianship trust account had flagged unusual activity. The account belonged to Sage Briggs. The trustee was Diane Alcott. In 9 months, $73,000 in expenses had been drawn from the account labeled as housing costs, educational materials, medical care. The expenses were fraudulent. The housing was a shed. The educational materials were the same classroom supplies every student received for free. The medical care was non-existent. Marsh had been building a case, by the book, carefully, gathering documentation that would be airtight in court that could not be challenged or dismissed. She laid this out at the long table because she had come here as someone willing to share information and willing to be honest about what her office had and had not done, which was more than Ryder had expected. He let her finish. Then he said 8 months. We got her out in 2 days. Marsh looked at him. She did not offer a defense because she had had 4 hours in the car driving here to think about exactly that fact, and she had arrived without a defense prepared because she had concluded that no defense she could construct was adequate. The system is built to move carefully, she said, to protect the rights of the accused, to gather evidence that survives challenge. Nobody built it to be cruel. It just turns out that way sometimes when the person inside it needs saving faster than the paperwork can catch up. She looked at the table at the files Weston had assembled at the church bulletin photograph Victor had sent her before she left her office. But here is what I can tell you. What you have handed me tonight changes the scope of everything. Wire fraud, insurance fraud across state lines, and given what you have found about Owen Briggs' federal murder charges. This is not a county case anymore. This is not something that gets closed under local pressure. She looked at Victor when she said the last part. She knew about the Gregory Alcott case. She had read the file when she was building her background on Diane. She knew why Victor had left the department. Victor held her gaze. We have one condition for full cooperation, he said. She waited. Sage gets a victim advocate assigned before any interview. Nobody from your office talks to her without her choosing to participate. And you move fast. Not months fast, days fast. Marsh looked at the photographs of the shed on Weston's laptop, the thermometer, the deadbolt, the camping mat on the concrete floor. She looked at them long enough that it was clear she was actually looking, not performing, looking. The warrant for Diane Alcott's arrest will be issued today, she said. Federal charges, no bail recommendation. I will personally ensure Sage has an advocate before anyone from my office approaches her. She paused. I want to see the full bulletin, everything the girl wrote. Victor slid the photograph across the table. Marsh read it. She read it twice. She set it down. The room was quiet enough that the wood stove was audible. She was planning a child's funeral, Marsh said. She already called the funeral home. Yes, Victor said. Marsh closed her folder, stood, extended her hand across the table, and Victor shook it. She looked at Ryder before she turned to leave. You do right by her, Ryder said. A beat. That's the job, she said. She walked out into the snow. The door closed behind her. The room exhaled. At 6:47 in the morning, Diane Alcott stood in her kitchen making coffee. She was humming. A hymn from Sunday service. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore a lavender blouse and pressed khaki slacks, sensible block-heeled pumps. Her small gold cross necklace caught the light from the window above the sink. She looked as she always looked, like every reasonable person's idea of a trustworthy woman. Competent, caring, composed. The kind of person a school selects to be its principal because she projects exactly the kind of reassuring stability that parents want around their children. She checked her phone. 9 inches of snow overnight. School would delay opening. She was not concerned she had dealt with dozens of snow days in her career. She checked her email, responded to 2 messages from the superintendent, poured cream into her coffee. She was not thinking about Sage. Or rather, she was thinking about Sage the way she always thought about Sage in the mornings, as a logistical matter, a task on a list. Unlock the shed at noon, offer breakfast in exchange for an apology. The child would be cold and frightened and compliant by then. That was the point of the nights in the shed. Cold and frightened and compliant was manageable. She had learned this with the others. Children were most cooperative when they understood that warmth and food were conditional. She had been managing children for 26 years in one capacity or another, and she had found this to be consistently true. She was on her second cup of coffee when the knock came at the front door. Deputy Ray Tillman was 34 years old and had been with Cumberland County Sheriff's Department for 6 years. He had been briefed at 6 in the morning by Prosecutor Whitfield himself, not through the standard dispatch chain, directly by phone before the shift change. He had been told what the situation was, what the evidence contained, and what the protective order required. He had also been told that Hell's Angels were cooperating with the investigation and he should treat them accordingly. What he found when he arrived was 4 motorcycles parked neatly along the street, 4 men in Hell's Angels cuts standing in the driveway, hands visible, not blocking access, not creating any scene. The one who stepped forward introduced himself as Victor Crane, former Cumberland County detective, retired 2009. Tillman knew the name. Every deputy who had been around long enough had heard Victor Crane's name usually attached to the story of the Gregory Alcott case, the case that got closed, the detective who left. Victor handed Tillman his phone and let him scroll through the photographs. The shed, the thermometer, the deadbolt, the camping mat, the single blanket with holes. Tillman scrolled through all of it. His jaw tightened on the thermometer photograph and did not loosen. He handed the phone back. "Where's the child now? Safe location," Victor said. "Medical supervision. Her grandmother is driving from Kentucky. Should arrive within 2 hours." He nodded toward the house. "And the guardian inside?" "She does not know yet." Tillman took a breath. "All right," he said. "I need you to step back while I make contact." Victor nodded. "We are not here to interfere. We are here to make sure this does not get buried." Tillman walked to the front door, knocked. The footsteps inside were unhurried, confident. The door opened and Diane Alcott stood there with her coffee mug and her gold-crossed necklace and her professional smile, and she said, "Good morning, Deputy. Is there a problem?" He told her. He watched her face go through its sequence. Confusion, disbelief. The pivot toward professional concern, of course, is she all right? She's in the shed out back. I was just about to go, let her in. I had to discipline her for leaving without permission yesterday," Sage Tillman said. "Her name is Sage." Diane's smile adjusted micrometrically. "Sage, of course. She's perfectly safe, I can assure you. Ma'am Sage is in protective custody. I have an emergency protective order barring you from contact with her pending investigation. The charges include child abuse, torture, and conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain." The smile stopped. 4 expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, the charm offensive. "I'm an elementary school principal. There must be some mistake. Sage is a troubled child who has been in grief therapy." And then just for a moment, for a fraction of a second, before the professional composure reasserted itself, calculation. The rapid internal assessment of someone trying to determine where the leak had been, how much was known, whether there was still a manageable path forward. There was not. But Diane did not know that yet. She stepped onto the porch with her coffee mug because Tillman asked her to step outside, and that was when she saw them. Victor standing at the end of the driveway, the 3 other brothers beside him. And beyond them, visible now as her eyes adjusted to the white morning light reflecting off 9 inches of fresh snow, more motorcycles. Down the block around the corner, the full weight of what had converged on 412 Maplewood Drive in the night. Her face changed. "This is harassment," she said. Her voice had an edge now, the professional warmth cracking at the seam. "I am a school principal. I have dedicated my life to children. I volunteer. I direct the choir. You cannot seriously." Victor stepped forward. "Mrs. Alcott." His voice was level and quiet, and absolute, the voice of a man who had been waiting 15 years for this conversation and had decided exactly how he intended to have it. My name is Victor Crane. I was a detective assigned to investigate the death of Gregory Alcott in 2009. I believe you remember me." Diane's coffee mug tilted in her hand. Coffee sloshed over the rim onto the porch floor. Victor continued, "We have the church bulletin. We have the insurance policy on Sage Briggs. We have the property records from Owen's house. We have testimony from 3 witnesses who reported concerns about Sage to your office at Harrowfield Elementary and received professional assurances in response. We have hotel camera footage from Nashville showing that the woman who checked in on the night of December 13th, 2023, was not you. And we have spoken with Nora Stanton in Chicago." He paused. Diane's face had gone from pale to gray. Not the performance of shock, not the managed response she had been deploying since Tillman knocked on her door. Something underneath that, something that had no performance left in it. "I don't know what you think we know about Linda," Victor said. "The hotel, the camera footage. We know you were not in Nashville the night Owen Briggs died." Diane opened her mouth, closed it. Tillman stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me for questioning. You are being detained for investigation regarding child abuse, torture, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are not free to leave." Diane looked at Victor one more time. Her eyes moved across the driveway to the motorcycles, to the men standing in the snow, to the neighbors beginning to emerge from their houses, drawn by the police presence, standing on their porches in winter coats with their morning coffees. Some of those neighbors had seen Sage over the past year. A thin girl, quiet, dressed in clothing that did not fit, walking to school in shoes that were wrong for the season. Some of them had noticed. Some had briefly considered whether something was wrong. None of them had done what a person does when they conclude that something is definitively wrong. They had told themselves it was not their business. They stood on their porches now and watched. "I want my attorney," Diane said. The coffee mug was still in her hand. She set it down on the porch railing with the careful precision of someone who needed to have control over something, even just the placement of a ceramic mug. She walked to Tillman's cruiser, got in the back. The door closed. Victor stood in the driveway for a moment after the cruiser door closed. He looked at the house, at the shed visible at the back of the property, at the deadbolt lock hardware on the shed's exterior door, black and heavy and specific in its purpose. 15 years he had carried the weight of the Gregory Alcott file. 15 years of knowing what he had known and being unable to do anything with it. 15 years of the slow, particular erosion that comes from understanding that the system you spent your working life inside can be captured by the very people it is supposed to stop. He looked at the shed. He thought about Sage asleep on the couch at the clubhouse, her hand on the pocket of her cardigan, even in sleep confirming the bulletin was still there. He pulled out his phone and called Dan Whitfield. "Dan," he said, "she's detained. We're ready to move." He listened for a moment. Then he said, "Yes. Make it federal. Make it everything." He hung up. Around him, the snow lay clean and white across 412 Maplewood Drive, covering the dead grass and the cedar shrubs and the gravel and the tire tracks. It covered everything equally the way snow does, making the world look briefly unmarked. The shed stood at the back of the property, empty, and 11 miles away, Sage Briggs was still sleeping. The arrest happened at 4:47 in the afternoon. Federal agents, 4 vehicles, weapons drawn because the protocol required it, and because a woman who had killed 3 people and was in the process of planning a 4th was not a woman you approach without protocol. They read Diane Alcott, her rights on the front porch of 412 Maplewood Drive in the cold afternoon light, with 9 inches of snow still on the ground from the night before and the temperature already dropping again. She did not struggle. That was not her way. Her way was composure and professional language and the careful management of perception, and she maintained it even now, even as the handcuffs closed around her wrists. The charges were read aloud. Federal wire fraud, interstate insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, 3 counts of suspected homicide pending full investigation. Richard Stanton, Gregory Alcott, Owen Briggs, attempted murder of a minor, child endangerment, torture, grand theft from a protected person's trust account. The bail recommendation was set at a number that accounted for the fact that a woman who had stolen and spent several $100,000 over the course of 26 years and had no remaining liquid assets was not a woman who would make it to her court dates if given the opportunity to run. The neighbors were out again. More of them this time. Word had moved through the street the way word moves in small communities, not through any single source, but through the accumulated weight of police vehicles and federal agents in the particular atmosphere of a situation that was no longer possible to characterize as routine. They stood on their porches and in their driveways, and they watched. Some of them had seen Sage, not once, not briefly, but repeatedly over the course of 11 months. A thin girl in clothing that did not fit, shoes that were wrong for the weather, a quietness that had a quality to it different from ordinary childhood quietness, watchful, measuring, calibrated. Some of them had felt something when they saw her. Not nothing, something. An unease, a flicker of recognition that something in the picture was wrong. They had let that flicker die without acting on it. They stood on their porches now, and they watched the federal agents load Diane Alcott into a transport vehicle, and they felt the full weight of what their inaction had cost, and none of them would ever fully put that weight down again. The transport vehicle pulled away. Diane's last words before the door closed were, "I want my attorney." She did not ask about Sage, did not ask whether the child was warm, whether the infection in her hands was being treated, whether she had eaten. Not one word directed toward the 11-year-old girl she had been entrusted to protect and had spent 11 months systematically destroying. She asked for her attorney, because even at the end, with the handcuffs on and the charges read, and 15 years of carefully constructed respectability collapsing in real time, Diane Alcott was thinking about Diane Alcott. The vehicle turned the corner and was gone. Victor stood in the driveway until the sound of it faded. Then he stood there a little longer, in the cold, not moving, not reaching for his phone, just standing in the place where something that had needed to happen for 15 years had finally happened. Then he got on his motorcycle and rode toward the clubhouse. Ryder sat in his truck in the clubhouse parking lot. He had watched the arrest from a distance, driven out to Maplewood with August Greer, and parked half a block down because he had needed to see it. Needed to confirm with his own eyes that the door had closed, that the transport vehicle had left, that Diane Alcott was in custody and not making a phone call to someone who owed her a favor and would quietly make the situation manageable. He had watched until the vehicle turned the corner. Then he had driven back. He sat in the parking lot now with the engine off and the cold coming through the windows, and he thought about his sister Callie, 13 years old when the foster care system lost track of her, 14 when they found her in an abandoned building on the east side of Knoxville, 6 months after she had run from a placement that nobody had adequately vetted because the system was overloaded and corners got cut and children fell through the gaps while the paperwork caught up. He had been overseas. He had gotten the call on a satellite phone in a place where satellite phones were the only way to communicate with the world outside, and he had stood in the dust and heat of a country very far from Tennessee and understood that he had failed the one person he was most responsible for protecting. Not because he had done anything wrong, he had been deployed. He had had no choice. He had been 19 years old and doing what 19-year-olds do when their country calls them, and Callie had been 13 and the system was supposed to take care of her while he was gone. The system had not taken care of her. He had carried that for 35 years, not loudly. He did not carry things loudly, but it was there the way certain weights become structural over time, not something you put down, but something that becomes part of the architecture of who you are, something that shapes the angle of everything else. He thought about Sage walking 47 steps across a library because she had run out of other options. He thought about her voice, 5 words so quiet the radiators almost swallowed them. Please don't send me back. He thought about her face when he had said smart kid, and something had shifted behind her eyes, some knot loosening. He sat in the truck for a long time. Then he went inside. Sage was awake. She was sitting on the center couch with both hands wrapped in fresh bandages. Hank had changed them twice in the past 18 hours, clean gauze, antibiotic ointment, careful attention to the infected areas that were beginning slowly to respond to treatment. Her color was better than it had been the night before. The hypothermia was resolved. The malnutrition was going to take weeks to address properly. The refeeding, careful and gradual, her stomach relearning the process of regular nourishment. She was holding the church bulletin. She had asked for it back that morning. Victor had provided her with a photograph of it. The original was now evidence logged and documented and secured. But Sage had asked for the photograph to be printed, and Dale Shepard had driven to a pharmacy and printed it because it was a small thing to do and it mattered. She sat with the photograph in her lap, not reading it, just holding it, looking at her own handwriting, the shaking script in the margins, the words she had pressed onto paper in the dark and cold of the shed, while Diane paced the yard 10 feet away. She heard Ryder come in. She looked up. He crossed the room and sat in the armchair across from her. He did not say anything immediately. He had learned in the past 18 hours that Sage did not need people to fill silences. She had had too much noise in her life, too many adult voices explaining things away, reframing things, telling her that what she knew to be true was not true. Silence was something she could work with. She looked at him. "Is it done?" she asked. He nodded. "She's in federal custody." Sage looked back at the photograph. She traced one line of her own writing with her fingertip, not the words about the insurance or the funeral home quote, but the section she had written about her father, about what Diane had said to Linda. Just like David, house fire, carbon monoxide. Poor man never had a chance. She had known in the way that you know things before you have language for them from the first month after her father died. Not the specifics, not the insurance or the alibi or the accelerant points or any of the things that investigators were now pulling apart. Just the animal certainty, the thing in her chest that said the story she had been told about her father's death was not the true story. She had not had a word for it. She had been 10 years old and grieving, and then almost immediately she had been surviving. And there was not space for both at once, so she had put the knowing somewhere deep and let it sit and focused on getting through each day. Now she had words for it. She had documentation. She had investigators and federal agents and a prosecutor who had issued an emergency protective order and a room full of men who had come when she asked. She had the truth. It did not bring her father back. She understood that with a clarity that was simple and devastating and simply had to be carried. The truth did not undo what had been done. It did not restore the 11 months. It did not give back the weight she had lost or the mobility in her fingers or the nights of sleep that fear had taken. But it was real, and real was something. She picked up the pen that Hank had left on the side table beside her broth. She unfolded the photograph of the bulletin, carefully found the bottom margin, the last remaining white space. Below the final line she had written on November 8th in the cold and the dark, she wrote 3 words: "I made it." She folded the photograph back along its creases, put it in the pocket of the purple cardigan beside the safety pins that had replaced the missing buttons, beside the faint smell of her father's house that still lived somewhere in the cotton after all this time. She looked at Ryder. He was watching her, not intrusively, not demanding, just present the way he had been present from the moment she had walked 47 steps across a library and said 5 words to a stranger. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me." He shook his head. "That is not something you thank someone for. Believing a child who tells the truth is the floor, not the ceiling." She considered that, the way she considered everything carefully from multiple angles, turning it over. Then she said, "Nobody else found the floor." He had no answer for that because it was true and they both knew it. So he did not offer one. Marvel Briggs arrived from Kentucky at noon. She was 63 years old, Owen's mother, the kind of woman who had been shaped by hard weather and hard work into something that looked from the outside like toughness, but was actually closer to the thing that toughness protects as a deep, specific tenderness for the people she loved, held carefully because she had learned that the world required you to hold it carefully or it got broken. She came through the clubhouse door and she saw Sage on the couch and she stopped. Sage looked up and saw her grandmother, and something happened in her face, not a breaking, not a collapsing, but an opening. The releasing of something that had been held under enormous pressure for an enormous amount of time. She stood up, took 2 steps, and then Marvel crossed the room and put her arms around her granddaughter, and Sage cried. Not quietly, not the contained, careful weeping of someone accustomed to monitoring herself. 11 months of compression releasing in a single sustained exhalation. The kind of crying that sounds like it is coming from somewhere below. Language below thought. From the place where the body keeps everything it was not safe to feel. Marvel held her and said nothing. She did not say it was okay because it was not okay. And she was wise enough to know that telling a child who had been through what Sage had been through, that it was okay, was an insult dressed as comfort. She did not say you are safe now because she knew enough about what her granddaughter had survived to understand that it would be a long time before safe felt like more than a word. She just held her. The men in the room found reasons to be in the kitchen or outside or looking at something on a laptop with great apparent concentration. August Greer alone remained in his armchair by the wood stove. He looked at Marvell over Sage's head and gave a single slow nod, and Marvell gave one back. The communication of 2 people who had seen enough of the world to understand what they were looking at. After a while, Sage's breathing evened out. Marvel sat beside her on the couch and smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Your daddy would be so proud of you," she said. Her voice was steady because she had made herself steady for this moment, for this child. Sage did not answer immediately. She was looking at the wood stove. Then she said, "She killed him, didn't she?" It was not a question. Marvel's jaw tightened. She breathed once. "The investigators think so." "Yes, they are going to prove it," I knew, Sage said. "I did not have words for knowing it." "But I know you did," Marvel said. They sat together in the warmth of the wood stove, while outside the temperature dropped toward another hard night, and the snow that had fallen was beginning to ice over on the roads. 3 days later, Sage sat in an examination room at Cumberland County Hospital. Hank was in the chair beside her. He had brought a small stuffed bear, navy blue, wearing a miniature vest that Dale Shepard had stitched together from a scrap of leather. He had set it on the table without ceremony. Sage had picked it up, held it not let go since. Dr. Lenora Fitch came in. She was the attending physician who had taken Sage's case from the emergency intake, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and reading glasses. She kept forgetting on top of her head, the kind of doctor who had been doing this long enough to know that medical care was only part of the work. She pulled up a rolling stool, sat at Sage's eye level. "Hi, Sage. I'm Dr. Fitch. I'm going to look at your hands and make sure the infection is responding the way we want it to." "Okay." Sage nodded. She extended both arms, set the stuffed bear carefully on the table beside her, and let the doctor unwrap the gauze. "Doctor." Fitch examined both hands with the thoroughness of someone who was building a complete picture, not just treating a presenting symptom. She noted the fresh burns still in the later stages of healing. She noted the older scars thick and raised the tissue restricting the movement of the middle fingers on the right hand. She noted the restricted grip. She noted what was responding to treatment and what was going to require more time and more specific intervention. Her expression did not change while she looked. Her voice got gentler. "The infection is retreating," she said. "The antibiotics are working. We are going to keep you on them for another 2 weeks and reassess. The older scarring is going to require occupational therapy. There are exercises that will help restore your range of motion. It takes time, but it works." She paused. "I also want to talk to you about seeing a therapist," she said. Someone who specializes in working with kids who have been through experiences like yours. It is not mandatory. It is your choice. But it can help in ways that medicine cannot reach. Sage looked at Hank. He nodded quietly. Okay, Sage said. Dr. Fitch smiled. Good. I will set that up before you leave today. She stood, shook Hank's hand, looked back at Sage. You are doing remarkably well, she said. I mean that medically, but I also mean it the other way. Sage picked up the stuffed bear. Later that same week, Victor made 3 phone calls that mattered. He called Nurse Deborah Hollis first. She answered on the 3rd ring. When Victor identified himself and explained why he was calling, there was silence. Then quietly, is Sage okay? She is safe, Victor said. But I need you to tell me what you saw. Deborah's voice cracked. I documented everything. March 17th, Sage came to my office during the health screening. She showed me burns on both palms, asked me if they looked normal for cooking accidents. I took photographs. I measured the wound patterns. I filed a report. Who did you file the report with? The principal, Deborah said. Patricia Diane. She is Sage's legal guardian. I followed protocol. I called her to my office, showed her the documentation, expressed concern about medical follow-up. What did she say? She thanked me, said Sage was clumsy and grieving her father, said she was in therapy, that the therapist said she was seeking attention through self-harm narratives. She promised to take her to the family doctor. Did she? I don't know. I never followed up. I trusted her. She is the principal. She has worked with kids for 20 years. I thought if anyone would handle it appropriately, it would be her. Deborah's voice broke completely. I knew something was wrong. I knew. But I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to do, and the rules failed her. Mrs. Hollis, Victor said, I need you to make a formal statement to the prosecutor's office. Everything you saw, everything you documented, everything you reported. Will you do that? A pause. It will help show the pattern, Victor said. It will show that multiple mandatory reporters tried to intervene and were systematically blocked by the person in authority. That matters. I should have done more. You can do more now, Victor said. Make the statement. She agreed. He called Ms. Patrice home next. She had quit teaching 2 months ago and moved to a different district. She answered with suspicion. When Victor told her why he was calling, the suspicion did not go away. It transformed into something harder. She whispered it to me during indoor recess, Ms. Holmes said. 5 months ago, she showed me the scars on her wrists. She said her stepmother did it. I reported it to the principal. Because that is what you are supposed to do, her voice was bitter. Diane pulled Sage's file, showed me documentation of behavioral issues, said Sage's therapist, who I later found out does not exist, said she was creating false accusations to process grief. Diane was so calm, so professional, so concerned. I believed her. What happened after that? Sage was moved to a different classroom within 3 days. Diane said it was because the personality conflict was affecting Sage's progress. I was told not to engage with Sage anymore. And you didn't. No, I avoided her in the halls. I looked away when I saw her in the cafeteria because I was uncomfortable, because I did not want to deal with the complexity of it. Why did you quit? Because I could not look at her anymore. Every time I saw her, I remembered that she had trusted me enough to tell me the truth, and I had chosen to believe the adult over the child. She stopped. You want my statement, she said. You will have it. Every word, every detail. I will testify if you need it. Because maybe if I had fought harder, then you would not need my testimony now. She hung up. Victor called Boyd Calloway last. Boyd had been Owen Briggs's closest friend. He answered on the first ring as though he had been waiting. When Victor explained the investigation, Boyd was quiet for a long time. Then he said, 2 months before the fire, Owen and I were working a construction job together. He mentioned that Diane kept pushing him to increase his life insurance, said she had brought it up 3 or 4 times, said it made him uncomfortable. What did you tell him? I told him it was just practical planning, financial responsibility. I told him he was probably being paranoid. Anything else, he said she had been researching Tennessee estate law, asking questions about what happens to a spouse's assets if they have a child from a previous marriage. Owen thought she was worried about Sage inheriting everything if something happened to him. I told him that was normal blended family stuff. Boyd paused. 3 weeks before he died, he said Diane had started talking about how dangerous old houses were. Faulty wiring, bad furnaces, carbon monoxide risks. He laughed about it, called it her worst-case scenario planning. I laughed too. He stopped. 3 weeks later, he was dead. Carbon monoxide, house fire, and I never questioned it, not once, because the death certificate said accidental, and Diane seemed so devastated, and I did not want to believe what the part of me that knew him best was telling me. Boyd Calloway, Victor said, I need everything, dates, conversations, concerns. Will you give a formal statement? Will it bring him back? No. Then why? Because it might prevent his daughter from ending up the same way he did. A long silence. I'll do it, Boyd said. God, I should have done it a year ago. 3 witnesses, 3 different points of failure, 3 people who had known and had not acted, each for their own reasons, each with their own accounting to do, not villains, just people who had made the choice that was easier than the alternative and who would spend the rest of their lives understanding what that choice had cost. The plea agreement was finalized on a Tuesday in February. Prosecutor Dan Whitfield called Ryder at 10 in the morning. The federal grand jury had indicted on all counts. The trial had been scheduled for May, but Diane Alcott's attorney had approached the prosecution the previous week. She was facing 3 murder charges, attempted murder, fraud, and torture. She was facing the full weight of a federal investigation that had, in the 3 months since her arrest, uncovered the complete architecture of 26 years of predation, the patterns so consistent, so documentable, so clearly intentional, that even a skilled defense attorney had concluded that a trial would result in consecutive life sentences. The plea deal offered instead 45 years federal prison, no parole eligibility. She would be 91 years old before she could apply for release. And Sage would not have to testify in open court. Whitfield had spoken with Sage and Marvell the previous afternoon. He had explained both options clearly without pressure, because Sage was old enough and had been through enough to deserve a clear explanation rather than a managed one. Sage had listened to everything. She had asked one question: if I do not testify, will the evidence still be enough? Yes, Whitfield had said, your recorded statement is entered as evidence. The documentation is sufficient. You would not need to be cross-examined. Sage had nodded. She had looked at Marvell and then looked back at Whitfield. I just want her to never hurt another kid, she said. That is the only thing I want out of this. The deal does that, Whitfield said. Then take it. Ryder held the phone after Whitfield confirmed the finalization. He sat in his kitchen with his coffee and the morning light coming through the window at a low winter angle, and he thought about what Sage had said. I just want her to never hurt another kid. Not I want her to suffer. Not I want the world to know what she did. Not any of the things that rage fully justified, fully earned might have produced. Just the one clear thing. The thing that was actually about someone other than herself. 11 years old, 68 pounds, 11 months in a shed, and her first concern was the next child. He finished his coffee, set the mug in the sink, went to the garage where his bike was waiting, and began his Saturday morning in the ordinary way, because ordinary mornings were a gift, and he had learned not to take them for granted. The house on Maple Street had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with good light, and a living room with a couch and windows that faced east. Marvel had rented it using the housing fund, first month last month, security deposit, the rest held in reserve for what the months ahead would need. Dale Shepard had called Marvell in January at a coffee shop on Main Street and slid a folder across the table. The Hells Angels chapters across Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia had raised $42,000, not from wealthy donors, not from a single source, from individuals, from people who had heard what happened or had been part of it, from men who had ridden through a November blizzard because a child needed help and who had continued to show up in the ways they knew how. The fund was managed by a third-party trustee. Full transparency. Marvell had complete oversight. Dale told her what it was earmarked for: education, medical expenses, therapy, whatever Sage needed. Marvel had looked at the number for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell them thank you. Tell them from both of us." "Tell them by using it," Dale said. "That is the thank you they are looking for." The bedroom Marvel gave Sage was the east-facing one because east-facing and meant morning light, and she had decided that Sage had had enough of waking up in the dark. She put up curtains, soft yellow, the kind that filtered light rather than blocking it. She found a quilt at a thrift store, blue and white, hand-stitched, smelling faintly of lavender. The kind of thing someone had made with patient hands and donated when they were done needing it. Not understanding that somewhere down the line it would go to a child who needed it very specifically. The first time Sage walked into the room and stood in the doorway and looked at it, she did not say anything for almost a minute. Then she walked to the bed and sat down on it and put her hand flat on the quilt. "This is mine," she said, quietly to herself as much as to Marvell, testing the words the way you test ice to see if it will hold. "It is yours," Marvell said, "for as long as you need it and longer." Sage lay back on the bed, looked at the ceiling, white smooth unmarked, no knots to count, no plywood grain, no frost on the edges of a cracked window. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Can I have breakfast tomorrow, like real breakfast?" Marvel's voice cracked just once, just briefly, before she steadied it. "Every single morning," she said, "for the rest of your life." Sage closed her eyes. That night she slept for 11 hours without waking. No sounds outside the door, no cold seeping through gaps in the wall, no counting, just sleep, deep and uninterrupted, the kind her body had been owed for 11 months and was finally collecting. 6 months after the night in the library on a Saturday morning in May, Ryder walked into the recreation room at Cumberland County, Virginia Hospital for his regular reading shift. He had been doing this for 7 years, every Saturday, 8 in the morning, reading to veterans who had lost their sight. It was not something he talked about or announced. It was simply something he did because there were men who had served and who could no longer read for themselves and who deserved to have someone show up regularly without drama and read to them. He stopped in the doorway. Sage Briggs was sitting with Walt Patterson, 84 years old, Army veteran, had lost most of his vision to macular degeneration 3 years ago, and she was reading aloud from a Louis L'Amour Western. Her voice was quiet and careful and steady, a little too formal in the way of someone who was concentrating on doing something well. The book was Hondo, the same title Ryder had been reading in the library on the night she had walked 47 steps toward him. She had not seen him yet. He stood in the doorway and listened. Walt was leaning slightly towards her, the posture of someone following a story carefully invested. When she finished the chapter and looked up, he was smiling. "You have got a good reading voice, young lady," he said. "You ever think about coming back next week?" "Maybe," Sage said. "If that is okay, more than okay, you come back next week. We will do another chapter." She looked up then and saw Ryder. Her face changed. Not dramatically, she did not perform her reactions. Had never been a child who performed her reactions. But something warmed in it, something that had not been there in the library 8 months ago. Something that belonged to a person who had reclaimed enough safety to allow herself uncomplicated pleasure at seeing someone she trusted. She lifted a hand in a small wave. He crossed the room, sat in the empty chair on Walt's other side. "Did not know you were volunteering here," he said. "Grandma said I should find something that helps people." She paused. "Hank told me you read here on Saturdays. I thought maybe I could help too." Ryder looked at this child. The purple cardigan, a new one, same color, same embroidered daisies along the collar, all buttons intact because Marvell had found it at a thrift store, and Sage had gone very still when she saw it, and then cried briefly, and then put it on and worn it every day since. The ponytail, the hands visible now, not hidden in sleeves, the scars clear in the morning light, thick tissue across the palms and forearms. The evidence of what had been done, written permanently on her skin. She was not hiding them. Walt spoke up. Ryder, this young lady has been telling me about school. Honor roll last semester. Can you believe that Ryder looked at Sage? She looked back at him with the expression of someone who was slightly embarrassed to have been praised, but not entirely unhappy about it. I can believe it, he said. After the reading session, they walked out to the parking lot together. The May morning was warm, the kind of warm that Tennessee produces in spring before the summer heat arrives. Clear skylight, wind, the trees along the road in full leaf. Ryder's motorcycle was in the lot. Marvell's car was 3 spaces down. How are things, he asked. Good, she said. Better. She thought about it for a moment. Therapy helps. Dr. Martinez is really good. And Grandma is teaching me to bake. Yeah, we made chocolate chip cookies last week. They were not perfect, but they were pretty good. They reached the edge of the lot. Marvell's car, Ryder's bike. The ordinary geography of an ordinary Saturday morning. Sage stopped. She turned to face him. Ryder, I wanted to say thank you for that night at the library, for believing me when nobody else would. You do not have to, he said. Yes, I do. She said it simply and directly without drama. You saved my life, you and all the brothers. I know I have said it before, but I need you to know I mean it every time. I am alive because you answered. He crouched down as he had done in the library parking lot on the night everything changed. She was taller now, 3 or 4 inches, almost did not need him to crouch. He did it anyway. Sage, you saved your own life. You walked 47 steps across that library when you were terrified and running out of time, and every person you had tried before had turned away. You kept the Bulletin for 11 days, and you protected it, and you showed it to the right person at the right moment. That took more courage than anything I have ever done. She looked at him. I was so scared, she said. I know you were. He met her eyes. That is what brave is. It is not the absence of fear. It is doing the thing anyway because the alternative is worse. You did that. We just showed up. Her eyes filled. She blinked. Then she hugged him quick and tight, the hug of someone who did not dispense them carelessly. And so when they gave one, it meant exactly what it meant, and she raced to her grandmother's car. He watched them drive away. He stood in the parking lot with the May sun on his face and thought about Callie, about the 14-year-old girl who had needed someone to show up and had not had one, about the 35 years he had carried that weight, about whether carrying it had been useful or whether it had simply been the thing you do when there is nothing else to do. He thought that maybe the weight did not disappear, that maybe it was supposed to be there because the weight was Callie, and Callie deserved to be remembered, but that it could be carried differently, that you could carry it in the direction of something rather than just carrying it in place. I got this one, Mel, he said quietly, to no one to the parking lot, to the particular kind of absence that is a person you loved who is no longer there, and she is helping the next one. 3 years after the night in the library, Sage Briggs was 15 years old. She was 5'2" and healthy, at a weight her doctor called ideal, and she called normal, which was really the same thing stated from different directions. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a ponytail. Her hands carried scars permanent visible in certain lights, the thick tissue catching the afternoon sun differently than the surrounding skin. She did not hide them. She had stopped hiding them somewhere around the 8th month of occupational therapy, when her grip had come back enough that her hands felt like hers again, rather than evidence. She wore the purple cardigan, all buttons intact. She was standing in the doorway of the Harrowfield Public Library. She had been volunteering here for 6 months. The community service requirement for Cumberland High was 40 hours annually. Sage had done over 200. Shelving books, helping with homework, running the children's reading hour on Saturday mornings. She had spoken to Carol Finch on her first day. Carol had looked up from the circulation desk and recognized her, and the recognition had been immediately followed by something complicated and unguarded crossing the older woman's face. Guilt in its full and accurate form, not the managed version that protects the person feeling it. Cassie, she had said, getting the name wrong in the way that people sometimes do when they are caught off guard and then correcting herself immediately. Sage, I am sorry. I heard about what happened. I should have. It is okay, Sage said. She meant it in the limited way that it was okay, not in the way that absolved Carol of the weight of what she had done, but in the way that allowed both of them to exist in the same building without the past crushing the present. I am not here about that. I am here to volunteer. Carol had nodded, could not speak for a moment. Why here, she finally asked. After everything, this is where my life changed, Sage said. I want to be here for the next kid who walks in looking for help. I want to be the person who sees them. Carol Finch had worked in this library for 26 years. She had seen a great many things come through its doors. She pressed her lips together and looked away briefly. Then she had handed Sage a volunteer orientation packet and said, "We are glad to have you." On a Thursday afternoon in April, a girl came into the library, maybe 9 years old, thin in a way that Sage recognized from the inside out, the specific thinness of a child whose body has been running on less than it needs for long enough that it shows in the face and the wrists in the way the clothes hang. She was wearing a jacket 2 sizes too large, still wrong for her in the way that ill-fitting clothing is always wrong, the signal underneath the surface. She sat down in the children's section and opened a book and did not turn a single page for 40 minutes. Sage watched her from the shelving cart. She knew the look. She knew what it meant when a child held a book like a prop, like something to do with her hands, while her eyes moved around the room in the particular pattern of someone assessing exits and threats in the faces of adults nearby. She put down the book she was shelving. She walked to the children's section slowly without urgency, giving the girl time to register her approach without feeling cornered. She sat down in the chair beside her, not across from her, because beside was less confrontational, and Sage had been thinking about things like that for 3 years. She looked at the cover of the book the girl was holding. "That is a good book," she said. "I read it when I was about your age." The girl looked up, wary, measuring, the eyes of a child who had learned to read adults the way Sage had learned to read them. "My name is Sage. I volunteer here." The girl did not offer her name yet. "Is everything okay?" Sage asked. It was a direct question. She had decided that Sage Briggs, at 11 years old, had needed someone to ask it directly, so she was asking it directly now. The girl's eyes filled. She shook her head. Sage felt the tightness in her chest, not panic, not the old fear, but something adjacent to it, something that was the ghost of the fear or transformed into purpose. She breathed through it. "Do you want to tell me about it?" The girl hesitated. Then she said in a voice so small it barely reached across the 18 inches between them, My stepdad. He gets really angry and I do not have anywhere to go." Sage nodded. She did not rush. She did not reach for her phone immediately, did not launch into reassurance that would have felt like the closing of a door rather than the opening of one. She let the words be real for a moment. Then she said, "You are safe here, and I know people who can help, people who will believe you." She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a name she had entered 3 years ago after a Saturday morning reading session, after a parking lot conversation, after a promise that had been made quietly and kept without fanfare. Hank Pruitt. The phone rang once. "Sage, Hank," she said. Her voice was steady. "I am at the library. There is a little girl here who needs help. She is scared. She is not safe at home." A beat, not of hesitation, of someone immediately orienting toward action. "We will be there in 20 minutes, Hank said. "Stay with her. Do not let her leave." "I will not." She ended the call, put her phone in the pocket of her cardigan beside the folded photograph with 3 words written in the bottom margin. She looked at the girl. "Some people are coming," she said. "They helped me once. They will help you too." The girl looked at her with the expression of someone who had been afraid for a long time and had just heard something that sounded improbably like a door opening. 23 minutes later, 4 motorcycles pulled into the Harrowfield Public Library parking lot. Hank came in first because Hank always came in first when there was a child involved. Weston behind him, Dale Shepard, and Ryder, who had come because when Hank called him, He had been on his way home, and the library was between where he was and where he was going, and because some things you show up for regardless of whether they are on your schedule. They walked in, not loudly, not performing anything, just present. The girl looked at Sage. "Are they going to help?" "Yeah," Sage said. "They helped me once." Hank crouched down, introduced himself, asked gentle questions in the quiet voice he had used with Sage 3 years ago in a different but not entirely dissimilar situation. The girl's name was Clara. She was 9. Her mother had remarried 2 years ago. The stepfather had started with words and had progressed past words 6 months ago. Within an hour, CPS had been called. Clara's statement was documented in the careful way that made it impossible to dismiss. An emergency placement was arranged with her biological aunt in a neighboring county. Deputy Tillman was on scene handling the official process with the particular care of someone who had learned what it looked like when the system worked the way it was supposed to. Sage stood near the circulation desk and watched it happen. Carol Finch stood beside her, not speaking, just watching. After a while, Carol said quietly, "You did a good thing today." Sage watched Clara leave with her aunt, watched the woman put an arm around the little girl's shoulders as they walked to the car, watched Clara look back once at the library before the door closed. "I just paid something forward," Sage said. She put her hand in the pocket of her cardigan, felt the folded photograph against her fingertips, the shaking handwriting in the margins. The 3 words she had added in a hospital room on a quiet morning when she had understood that the chapter she had survived had an actual ending and that she was standing on the other side of it. "I made it." Outside, the April afternoon continued its ordinary business. The motorcycles sat in the parking lot in the warmth. The town of Harrowfield went about its Thursday the way small towns do, unremarkably, in the particular way of places where most things are fine most of the time, and the things that are not fine are happening in sheds and closed rooms that the town has not yet decided to look at. But in the library, a 15-year-old girl with scars on her hands and a purple cardigan with embroidered daisies stood at the circulation desk and understood something about the shape of things. That the 47 steps she had taken 3 years ago had not ended in the corner of that library. They had continued through the hospital and the clubhouse and the house on Maple Street and the VA hospital on Saturday mornings, in the courtroom where 45 years was written into the record, in the thrift store where a cardigan, the right color, was waiting, in the therapy office where Dr. Martinez had helped her find language for things that had lived below language for too long. And they continued here, in this library, on this Thursday, in a 9-year-old girl named Clara, who was now in a car with her aunt, instead of wherever the alternative would have taken her. The steps kept going. That was the thing about Brave she understood now. Not the single dramatic act, not the one moment in the fluorescent light with the radiators clanging. The thing that happened after. The decision made over and over on ordinary days that did not feel like anything in particular to keep walking in the direction you had chosen. 47 steps, and then the next ones.